let's go back to last week at the vice presidential debate. Tim Walz, facing off against J.D. Vance, was asked about Minnesota's very permissive abortion legislation. And he pretty deftly dodged the question and instead made it an issue about the restrictive abortion laws in states like Georgia. Let's take a look at how he answered that question, because he told a very interesting story to answer it.
The question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care.
Liar.
Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today.
Yeah, so Viva, go ahead.
I hate his face. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say he's got fish mouth. Like he's got the male version of fish mouth, and it makes me want to.
Yeah.
I hate
put a hook with a worm in it.
no, oh God, no. Just, I look at the and the way he talks, like he's always like.
He's
sorry,
yeah.
I should not.
His eyes get wide because he's passionate.
And he lies and he misspeaks because he's a knucklehead. He's a liar. That was a lie.
Sometimes. But as he said, Amber Thurman, she was a 28-year-old resident of Atlanta, Georgia, who died while traveling to North Carolina to receive an abortion because Georgia's heartbeat bill allegedly would not allow her to get the procedure. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
This was not the first time the Harris-Walz campaign has brought up the case of Amber Thurman. She died in 2022. It just recently reemerged as a national story. They have seized on it pretty aggressively in the run-up to the vice presidential debate. Let's look at this tweet from Kamala Harris that she put out a couple weeks ago. A young mother from Georgia should be alive today, raising her son and pursuing her dream of attending nursing school. This is exactly what we feared when Roe v. Wade was struck down. In more than 20 states, Trump abortion bans prevent doctors from providing basic medical care. Women are bleeding out in parking lots, turned away from emergency rooms, losing their ability to ever have children again. Survivors of rape and incest are being told they cannot make decisions about what happens next to their bodies. And now women are dying. These are the consequences of Donald Trump's actions.
May I just pause? Do you remember when they were putting out the lies that people were dying from gunshot wounds because they were ODing on hydroxychloroquine, or the other one? Do you remember, or the one that was in the fish tank? I forget what it was called.
That's HCQ.
These are the same pathological lies, the same strategies, alarmism, and lies. Sorry.
Exactly.
No, but thank you.
Yeah, Vinny, did you have?
No.
Okay.
I got to say he was.
So she has said this dozens of times since then. This was her first tweet on it. She said it when she sat down with Oprah. She mentioned it at a campaign rally. She mentioned it while being interviewed by the National Association of Black Journalists, which is truly unfortunate that they have not desegregated journalism yet. You know, maybe one day we'll make progress there.
Yeah.
But her most recent one was during her appearance on the often sexually explicit Call Her Daddy podcast that aired on Sunday. If we can roll that clip as well. Harris went on a long tear about what this
Can we see that? Yeah.
story was about. This is her talking with Alex Cooper on Call Her Daddy.
Names. We have these horrific moments that these people are losing their lives, right? We have a woman named Amber Thurman who died in Georgia because the abortion bans in that state, the doctors were too afraid to treat her. Yeah. I know that you spoke to her family.
Yeah.
What was that conversation like?
It was heartbreaking, Alex. It was heartbreaking. Her mom and her two sisters. And so Amber
She's trying to get the lie.
Was a young mother of a 6-year-old son. She was a medical assistant who was so excited because she was just getting on her feet to be independent. She got her own apartment in a gated community with a pool that her son could play in.
Yeah.
Gated community.
She got accepted to nursing school. She was, as described by her
Get
family,
to the point.
so excited and so ambitious, and she had plans. Then she found out she was pregnant, and she didn't want to go through with her pregnancy, and she was living in Georgia, and she couldn't receive care there because she was past 6 weeks.
Georgia is a state.
And so she ended up going to another state, and because she was basically, it was she couldn't get there on time. And because the other state had been so overwhelmed by all these women coming from all these southern states who couldn't get treatment,
guarantee that
in their own state, the window for her appointment had closed. So instead of having a surgical procedure, she had medication, and basically went back home and then had some complications and went to the hospital because she was bleeding, and they delayed 20 hours
that sounds like
before they treated her. Because here's the thing that's so messed up about this. Some of these people will say, well, but I do believe in exceptions. I believe that there should be an exception in terms of in the life of the mother. Okay, here, let's talk about this. This gets back to, again, practical application of policy. Okay, so you believe there's an exception that the person should receive abortion care if the life of the mother is at risk. You know what that means in practical terms? She's almost dead before you decide to give her care. What? So we're going to have public health.
I love it when she shocks herself with her own bullshit. Like, what? Did I just say that? Because that's absolutely incorrect.
So the reason I played that clip, and I thank you all for staying with me through that one, I know it was a little bit long, is because she actually revealed more of the truth in that story than she has in the past. Most of the time she's told that story, she talks about Amber Thurman went to go to North Carolina because Georgia was too strict, and then in the process she died. And she acknowledged that, no, we'll get into the facts, but she got medication and came back, and here's what happened. But the way this story first broke was from an outlet called ProPublica. We have that article as well. This broke middle of last month, right around the time Harris started talking about it. So basically, this outlet gave the Democrats their new abortion talking point leading into the election season and the debates. They're an independent nonprofit newsroom that, of course, regularly supports and donates to pro-abortion causes. And you can see from the headline, abortion bans have delayed emergency medical care in Georgia. Experts say this mother's death was preventable. And then this was immediately picked up by a bunch of other major news outlets. We have a collage of some of them. Newsweek, New York Times, MSNBC, Associated Press, and others, in addition to the Harris-Walz campaign. Can we throw that next graphic up as well, just so you can see these headlines? The drama that they have in there.
This is
Amber
disinformation
Thurman
laundering.
Exactly.
This is how it happens.
One outlet broke the story. Every other one of them
picks it
up and ran with it, with them getting more and more hysterical, because now it's not just preventable. You can see it goes to now it's killing somebody, literally killed a woman, and then AP was talking about how it's all Trump's fault. And they're just saying, Kamala Harris said it's Trump's fault, but. The place to go from there is that ProPublica itself, in its article, acknowledged that what they were saying wasn't true. 57 paragraphs into their article, they reveal some of the facts, and these are facts that have been since exposed. Vinny, I actually texted you during the Unusual Suspect stream for the vice presidential debate. I texted a fact check to you that you read on air. But I want to kind of go into that a little bit. So here are the facts. Amber Nicole Thurman had a 6-year-old child, and she was pregnant with twins, which is already complicated for an abortion procedure because there's twice as many embryos to get rid of. She was 9 weeks pregnant when she decided she didn't want to keep them. Georgia's abortion restrictions mean you can't get the procedure after 6 because that's when fetal heartbeat is detected. It's a heartbeat law. And, in my own experience, just having heard the heartbeat of my unborn child a few weeks ago, once you hear that, anyone who looks at that and says, I want to end that is, I'm not even going to touch that one.
Yeah.
But she was too far along to terminate the pregnancy in Georgia. She drove to North Carolina where it's permitted. She got stuck in traffic. That was one of the key facts Harris has not acknowledged. It's that it wasn't, some complication with trying to make the appointment. She just was late. She went to a clinic, and rather than perform the scheduled surgical abortion that they had planned for her, they gave her the abortion drugs mifepristone and let me see the other one. Mifepristone and mifepristol, which are two.
That is the one that sort of bypassed FDA approval, and that they say is totally safe, and yet it's wildly.
Yep, they say it's
unsafe.
as harmless as Tylenol, despite the fact that it has been linked to multiple deaths of women who take it, particularly once they're more than a few weeks into their pregnancy.
So 9 weeks pregnant, you take this.
Yeah. This is a picture of Amber Thurman.
It obviously
Yeah.
does.
And what happens to the?
So what's supposed to happen is that it kills the embryo and then causes your body to expel it, which basically means
You're giving birth.
you basically you give birth and then flush the embryo down the toilet.
Dude.
So it's a miscarriage.
Yes,
It's basically
it
a medically
induces a
induced
miscarriage. And
Some would say murder because the thing's heart
Yes.
is beating.
Which are
if I make your heart start beating, I go to jail.
they're traumatic for a woman to go through
Yeah.
if they want to keep the baby. My wife and I, before we had our 5-year-old, she had a miscarriage, and it was something that as a man I felt guilty for not understanding what she was going through, and then the fear she had going into our 5-year-old. Yes, because there's that fear that at any point something can happen. So I know how traumatic of a process that is for someone. It wasn't like my wife didn't get an abortion. She had an actual miscarriage in our home. But I know how difficult that can be for a woman who wants to keep the child. I wonder if a woman who doesn't want to keep the child has any emotional connection.
you would hope.
that.
You would hope.
Yeah.
And Rob, like you've made a very important distinction there, and I'll circle back around to that.
And then just really fast, because I don't forget that point. My mom had 3 miscarriages back to back to back, and then had my sister, me, and my brother. So shout out to my mom for not giving up. But anyway, go ahead.
You've made the important distinction between an abortion and an actual miscarriage. There's a key distinction that Democrats will often try to gloss over because it helps them divide the agenda. So back to these drugs: mifepristone, misoprostol. They are legally obtainable over the counter in several states. CVS recently got approval to start selling them. So these drugs are legally prescribable. The clinic gave them to her. She took 1 dose in the hospital or in the clinic and then insisted on driving home. No follow-up care was given. She wanted to get home before any symptoms started. She left the clinic. They didn't follow up with her. 5 days later, she began vomiting, passed out several times, and was exhibiting symptoms of sepsis. Because what happens is that the drugs are supposed to kill the embryo and then cause it to break down and pass out of the body. In many cases, like Viva said, these drugs are not safe. The fetal tissue is not completely expelled, which means there are rotting body parts stuck inside your body as you're passing it.
Jeez.
She did not expel all the tissue. She was beginning to get sepsis. Her family took her to the hospital after she passed out and had severe torso pain. In the hospital, she was vomiting and turning blue. The doctors waited 20 hours to perform any kind of operation on her. They diagnosed her with sepsis immediately and then sat there for 20 hours. Almost full day. They brought her in. They observed, massive organ infection that had spread out of the uterus into her other body parts. She died on the operating table.
Jeez.
She left behind her son, who was 6 years old at the time, and her grieving family, who were largely kept in the dark about her condion when they brought her in.
This is why when you get into hospitals, you need an advocate who makes sure that you're getting the care that you need. You go in there, and if you're voiceless, you will be neglected.
Yeah. No reason for the delay was ever given, and they didn't keep her family appraised. Her family said after, if they had known the severity of her condition or had known what was happening with the procedure to begin with, they would have tried to do something. There was nothing they could do. Under the narrative the Democrats have established about this, they are saying this is entirely the fault of Georgia's abortion restrictions and Donald Trump, who packed the Supreme Court with ridiculous conservative justices that overturned Roe v. Wade. So let's look at Georgia's heartbeat law. Georgia House Bill 481, passed in 2019, was ruled unconstitutional in 2020. That decision was reversed in 2022. Then it was struck down again early last month. Then last week it was reinstated by the Georgia Supreme Court. It says abortion means the act of using, prescribing, or administering any instrument, substance, device, or other means with the purpose to terminate a pregnancy with knowledge that termination will, with reasonable likelihood, cause the death of an unborn child. Provided, however, that any such act shall not be considered an abortion if the act is performed with the purpose of removing a dead unborn child caused by a spontaneous abortion, that's a miscarriage, or removing an ectopic pregnancy. Hold that in your mind as I discuss this. Elsewhere in the bill, it states, no abortion shall be performed if the unborn child has a detectable human heartbeat, except in the event of a medical emergency or medically futile pregnancy. So when the Democrats try to tell you that The reason the doctors waited 20 hours to operate on her is because they were afraid of being imprisoned for performing this operation. It is a complete lie. They are lying to you. They are lying to your face because they think you're too stupid to look it up yourself. I Googled the PDF of this bill in less than 30 seconds. It came up, scrolled to the part where it said that. It has exceptions for ectopic pregnancies, which is when the embryo implants outside of the uterus, which means it's not viable, which means it's going to die. And when it dies, it will harm the mother. Ectopic pregnancies, even in the most restrictive states in the country, are fully permissible because they are not abortions. When there's a miscarriage where the baby dies, but it's too far along for the body to break it down naturally, and there has to be surgical intervention. I know people who've had this happen to them. It's heartbreaking. That's totally allowed because it's not an abortion, because it's a miscarriage, a natural abortion, which means the baby died on its own. Amber Thurman took drugs that killed the twins that were inside her body. They were already dead when she got to Georgia. They were already rotting, as horrific as it is to think about. But
it's a fact.
She had reduced her children to rotting corpses, and whatever reason she had for doing that, it's horrific. There was no risk to the doctors for performing an operation. It's treating it like an infection with needing surgical intervention.
There's two things to this. It's either outright medical malpractice or it's doctors playing politics, and if they get someone to die as a result, all the better, they get the headlines. And it's one of the two. By the accounts of the family, they're suing for medical malpractice. So, they don't even want this narrative to be the one that is being told because it's not in their interest regardless. The bottom line is, had she taken her own life because she couldn't get access to an abortion in whatever state she was in, they would call it Trump abortion ban killing a woman. Had she tried to take her life and failed, and then doctors didn't resuscitate her, they would blame it on Trump.
Had she been in a car accident?
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. On the way to North Carolina, her car veers off the road.
Gonna go to Trump.
It's all because of Trump.
People who don't know this, mifepristone is used in a combination with misoprostol to end a pregnancy 70 days or less. Mifepristone is taken first, followed by misoprostol up to 48 hours later. Misoprostol causes contractions that expel the pregnancy tissue after they've effectively killed the fetus. And I went to the Mayo Clinic to look up side effects of mifepristone. You know, it's not on that side effect list. Death.
Weird.
Just like, dizziness, coughing, whatever.
And you look at all the pro-abortion activists, and they will tell you, these drugs should be available in all 50 states. They're safe. They're effective. It's as harmful as taking a Tylenol. It is not. There are dozens and dozens of cases over the last few years of women who take this. Same thing happens. They don't expel the fetal tissue. They get sepsis. They die. The infection causes an organ rupture. They die. It's dangerous to try to go about this way. And whether you want to argue for pro-abortion, anti-abortion, whatever, the chemical abortion induced by these drugs is harmful. But because it's such a politicized topic, nobody's allowed to discuss it. And to try to circle this whole thing around and blame it all on Trump overturning Roe v. Wade, which, again, Trump does not support a federal abortion ban as much as people like me might wish he would. He says it should be decided by the states. That was all that was accomplished with overturning Roe. It was a rightly decided decision. Every state gets to make their own decisions on it now, for better or worse. That's the situation we're living under. The family has of Amber Thurman has been working with a civil rights and personal injury attorney named Ben Crump. I've mentioned him before on this show in other contexts. I think I've described him as the angrier, balder, dumber version of the Reverend Al Sharpton, but
he gets dumber than that.
Yeah, apparently so. In Ben Crump, he put out a statement on behalf of the family where they were thanking Tim Walz for acknowledging her death on stage and saying, we're committing to this fight, and we condemn Republicans for their barbaric legislation on abortion. But then just yesterday, they filed a lawsuit against the hospital in which Crump stated, and I quote, "Even under Georgia law, the doctors had a duty to act to save Amber. She had taken the abortion pills and there were tissue left. There were no viable fetus or anything that would have prevented them from saving her life while she suffered. Quote, you have a duty to stabilize her and then give her the option to go to another hospital facility, but you cannot let her suffer and die on your hospital bed when the death is preventable." So yes, Amber Thurman's death was preventable. Medical professionals could have told her, hey, the life inside your body is sacred, don't kill it. They could have told her, hey, these drugs you're taking are dangerous and harmful and have severe side effects that could kill you. Find another way. The doctors in Georgia could have said, hey, there's no risk to us under this law because your children are already dead. We're going to operate now and save your life. From the top down, it is medical malpractice, incompetence, and naked politicizing of the death of a young woman who has now left a child without a parent. And that's the true tragedy. But the attempt to throw it all out and say, oh, it's Trump's fault, it's Republicans' fault, blame the pro-lifers, they're the ones who caused this, that lets the true evil of the abortion industry escape without scrutiny. And it's high time that ended, I think.
All right. Dude, I mean, thanks for putting it out that they are all full of crap. Every single thing that Kamala and all the walls and all the... So everything... But by the way, I didn't know all that stuff in detail. Now that you said it and now that I hear them talking, not as if I thought that they would ever tell the truth, but I appreciate the hell you kind of... So if you like this clip, click right here. And if you want to see more like it, click right here. Stay angry, Patriots.